Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, days and thems. Today I'm joined by Joyce Kim. Joyce, I'm very lucky to call one of my friends. She's an award-winning architect and designer, and one of my favorite people. Thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me.
I wouldn't have missed it. You ever play the Roller Coaster Tycoon games growing up?
Actually, no. I was definitely much more of the Sims.
I was thinking about this. In a lot of ways, an architect is a world builder. You have plans and designs for whole communities.
Yeah.
Architects, in many ways, are our world builders now. How do you feel about that description?
I think there's an element to that for sure. I think the type of work that I do mostly has been in residential. So I'm mostly working with the more intimate sort of how you live in your home. You know, those questions are a lot more personal to each person.
Do you feel like you end up with a lot of strange requests from people?
If they have specific quirks, that can influence the program or their needs, right? I had this one client where they wanted an observation deck where they could shoot coyotes off of. And you don't see that in a conventional home. You would never see something like that here.
Where am I supposed to shoot coyotes here? Come on, man.
There are other clients who are car collectors, vintage car collectors. They're I want to be able to live with my cars. I want to be able to drive the car into my living room and just, live with it. And so there are certain clients that kind of can make the project fun for sure.
As I was going through your work, I was amazed at looking at the different projects, how specific you are about the different decisions you've made. Do you feel like there's a lot of applications to the rest of life that come from being so specific about your decisions and design?
I think with architecture, you do deal with a lot of constraints. You are dealing with a lot of just real forces in life, right? You can't just cantilever any building off of any ground or whatever, or use whatever material you want. It has to make sense with the context. But I think there's something interesting about having a lot of constraints. I do think that creativity, you have to be more creative in order to work within such constraints, because sometimes I feel when you don't have constraints,
it's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. You don't have really a sense of direction on where to go. There's all possibilities. For me, I feel I always in part of my process, it's always been a response, whether it be an emotional response that I'm feeling, or a response to an event that inspires me. That is my why in what I create.
Where does the emotion fit into something like building a structure?
So one example I think that we have here in Austin, on a smaller scale, but this artist, James Turrell.
Oh, James Turrell. Yeah, I know James Turrell. Beautiful.
He plays with spaces, architecture a bit, colors, and I think colors also we have an emotional response to color too.
Right.
And so I feel he really charges the spaces, those kind of atmospheres, makes it super minimal so that you can really experience some pure emotion. Everyone will have a different emotional response when they're inside a space, right?
Interesting.
So you can't really control, I think, how someone's going to feel in a certain environment. James Turrell kind of plays with that a little bit.
You're making me think of, you know who Hunter S. Thompson is?
No.
Hunter S. Thompson is a big inspiration to me, especially as of recently. The most famous piece of work he's done is probably Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, if you've heard of that.
Oh, okay.
He is the man who founded what we call gonzo journalism. Back in earlier times, let's say in the 1950s, all journalism, ironically, the goal of original journalism was to just be objective and report the facts.
Yeah.
And he was one of the first people who popularized the idea of telling a story about an event that happened, but instead of being so factual in your reporting as a journalist of what happened, intentionally being biased and subjective. He wrote a story about the Kentucky Derby, and it's called The Kentucky Derby is Depraved and Defunct or something like that. And it's his entire subjective experience of him taking copious amounts of drugs and going with this English guy who is an artist to paint pictures and interview people at the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
The way he writes is nightmarish. It's just, it's sleazy and dirty and disgusting the way he writes, and it's so much fun. And so he was the first person who coined that. And the reason I'm saying this is when I read that first piece of work, his first piece of art, I had that same feeling of no one else could make this art and tell the story in the way he just did. It's I think good art is in the specifics, right? The little details that no one else has the capability to make except for you, or you happen to be the one to channel that piece of inspiration when it happened, right?
Yeah. That makes me think of this piece of advice I got from my thesis advisor. Difference builds strength. Individual creativity inside a community is a profound social act. So our story into a shared story of us is a political act. So basically, if you go deep enough and immerse yourself enough into your own individual like idiosyncrasies, that opens up space for others to share their own story. And he said, difference is what makes our shared story. So
difference is what makes our shared story.
Yeah, that really struck me, like this idea of putting yourself out there, create space for others to feel comfortable to share their stories as well. I think a lot of us operate on this fear of being different, of wanting to kind of conform to and stay in line with what other people are doing. We're always looking to precedents because that's like, oh, we see this person had success doing it in this format or whatever. It's great to learn those things for sure. Like
pick up
absorb,
game.
you know, be a sponge. But also I think there's something super significant in being able to like go inward a bit, exploring yourself within your work. Because when you do that, you'll find that other people can relate to that experience as well. We all share like a collective conscious experience. And so like when you operate on you yourself first, I think that definitely opens that conversation up for other people to relate, to interact, to, you know.
I have a lot of different thoughts that come up when you say that. And I resonate very much with what you're saying. When you look at the difference between me and you, for example, there's a lot more in common than there is different. I believe when we look at the world, we're looking for ourselves. And we see ourselves in beautiful design, in beautiful architecture, in paintings, in videos, in music. We see glimpses of ourselves. So I feel exactly what you're saying, that you have the ability to inspire other people to pursue their specific nuances and details and things that light them up as you do the same, if you're just brave enough to put it out into the world.
Even this promenade walk, you know, we're doing something different. We could be sitting in a cafe somewhere having this exact conversation.
Not a bad idea. Instead, we're walking by the side of the road while cars pass.
I think one thing that I've learned about myself that I thought was like something that I was just going through myself, but then as I started talking to more people about it and opening up a bit about what was going on through my head, that was something that I had not really been familiar with.
What do you mean?
Just like leaning on people for support, you know?
Oh, I feel that actually heavily.
Working through your issues or things that are going on. I have this sort of fear of like failure, but in like the public sphere.
What do you mean? Like you're gonna commit social suicide somehow?
I guess
get canceled?
maybe because like I just was always in an environment like at RISD where you're in these critiques. There's always a panel of like highly intelligent, highly qualified people judging your work, critiquing your work.
Ugh.
If you get one bad critique, you know, you get roasted or something like that. Like,
Oh my God.
it feels like a public failure, right? And then you're like, oh my God, all these people just watched me like absolutely eat all that
crow.
shit. Yeah.
Why did I even bother in the first place?
And so maybe there's just something from that like carried over into where it was hard for me to create anything and put it forward in a way where I felt like comfortable with people watching, experiencing, or like, you know, interacting with anything. Just being perceived is like a really scary thing for me. Like that took a long time for me. And I still struggle with this. I was so stuck because of this fear of failure. And being in this, like, I have really had to switch my thought process from this high stakes, sort of very serious, intense mindset work to like being like, let's be a little more, I guess, playful with this. Like, let's be in a state of play. Just put it all out there and see what lands. And you know, some things are gonna stick and you can run with it, but just keep it going, you know?
Hey, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for going on this walk with me.
Yeah, thank you.
You know,
for
technical
inviting me on
difficulties
this walk.
aside.
Yeah.
You
We
know,
roll with the punches.
we do. That's what we do.
We keep it moving.
Keep it pushing. I'll see y'all on the flip side.